On a dark night in the mountains, the terrifying sound of a chainsaw is heard. As we approach the sound, we see a silhouette fiercely cutting something with the chainsaw. Branches and more branches begin to fall. The moonlight illuminates a woman holding the chainsaw in front of a tree. She sighs, tired but at the same time satisfied with her work. Finally, the pruning is all done. She concludes while looking at the tree, and then she begins to insert a nutrient solution into it through an IV. Extremely pleased, she gives the tree a few gentle pats, saying, "You were thirsty, weren't you? Drink it all and get strong." Sighing as if venting to the tree, she is slightly irritated with the owner of the land, who seems to not understand the value of life, as most of the trees in that place are malnourished. She gathers her tools, says goodbye to her patient, and goes to check on the other trees. As she walks, she recalls how her day was. Administrative work, billing clients, and checking on her patients. A normal day. But that was about to change. Among the trees, she witnesses a horrifying scene. An injured man trying to climb out of a hole pleads for his life to another man wearing a black hooded coat. The hooded man scoffs at the pleas, saying he should be begging for him to finish it quickly. After that remark, the hooded man pushes the other man back into the hole with his foot. Screams and sounds of kicking are heard while our protagonist is frozen in terror, watching what appears to be a murder. Trying to rationalize, she starts thinking she needs to call the police. Fast. Trembling, she begins to pull her phone from her pocket, but as she takes a step back, she crushes some dry branches on the ground, making noise. The hooded man, who was shoveling dirt into the hole where he put the other man, stops what he's doing. He turns toward our protagonist. Annoyed, he swears and looks straight into her eyes. She, with her heart pounding wildly as she tries not to make another sound, realizes she has been seen. "You there? Don't you think you should be running?" says the hooded man, then gives a terrifying smile. His words hit our protagonist like a bucket of cold water. She finally reacts and begins to run, desperately sprinting through the bushes. This seems to amuse the hooded man, who quickly starts chasing her. While running, she calls the police to report what she saw. She also begs them to send someone quickly. Just as she finishes that sentence, transparent wires wrap around her neck and her body is yanked against the man's. He hands her the chainsaw back, taunting her, saying she dropped it and should take better care of her things. Captured, she whimpers, wondering if this is the moment she leaves this world. She starts to remember her life, how she always wanted to live quietly and peacefully when she was younger, how she thought she had found what she wanted in her job. The memories make her refuse to give up on herself so easily. She attacks the man with the chainsaw, catching him by surprise. As he looks at her, shocked and stunned by her reaction, the man who is being buried reaches them and hits the hooded man squarely with a huge rock. This causes him to stumble and fall unconscious down the slope. While our protagonist is still worried and trying to understand what just happened, the man who struck the hooded figure runs off. The scene cuts to a dark room, lit only by a dim reddish light. A man wearing glasses smokes a cigar while staring at our protagonist. She is sitting on a chair with her hands tied, trying to understand who this man is and how she ended up there. The last thing she remembers is being in the mountains watching the hooded man unconscious. Her thoughts are interrupted by the sound of flesh being sliced. Looking toward the sound, she realizes she's in some kind of butcher shop. The man smoking the cigar asks her why she did that. "The person you almost killed in the mountains is my younger brother." With that statement from the mysterious man, our protagonist realizes she's dealing with a family of insane people, and if she wants to survive, she'll have to be very careful with what she says. She starts by trying to explain that he must have misunderstood something, that she only acted in self-defense, and that the one who hurt his brother wasn't even her, but someone else who was there. Desperate, she says that his younger brother was the one trying to kill someone first, trying to bury that person alive. The man interrupts her, stating that he sees nothing wrong with burying someone, and that he's only irritated because his fun got interrupted by this whole mess. At this moment, we notice there's a metal drum beside the man, moving as if something is trapped inside. Our protagonist realizes she's in a worse situation than she thought, as it seems common sense isn't strong in this family either. She tries again to explain that it wasn't her, that she was just in the mountains taking care of the trees, and that the person being buried was the one who suddenly hit his brother from behind. But the man seems bored with her explanation. He looks at his wristwatch while telling her that his brother has a good ear and wouldn't be caught off guard that easily. She begins to cry, swearing that what she's saying is true. The man puts out his cigar, walks up to our protagonist, grabs her by the shirt, and says, "So, Livia, whether it was you or not, I don't give a damn. All I know is my younger brother is now in a vegetative coma, and someone has to pay for that." At that moment, we learn our protagonist's name is Livia. Livia looks at the man in shock upon hearing that the hooded killer is now in a coma. The light in her eyes fades as she processes the information, fearing this means she won't leave there alive. But the man makes her an offer. Instead of placing all the blame on her, he'll go after the guy she says hit his brother with the rock. And in exchange for his generosity, she will have to take care of his brother while he's in a coma. As he says this, the man places a contract in front of her for her to sign. She signs it, and he makes one final request. If possible, that she ensures his brother never leaves Huaido. After that, 2 years pass. We see Livia working as a caretaker of trees and plants in a place that looks like a school. She tells a suited man that the tree is constipated. It can't efficiently exchange nutrients. The man seems confused by what she says, but begs her to help the tree since it's important to the school and the children love it. Livia says it won't be hard to save the tree. Despite the look of relief on the man's face, his thoughts say something else. He's actually using the tree to embezzle money from the school. But our sharp protagonist is not as naive as he imagined. She asks him if he put something in the soil. She says she knows the school is undergoing renovations, maybe pieces of bricks or cement, or perhaps plastic bags. Who knows, maybe he threw all of that into the soil, which would explain the tree's roots rotting. The man tries to play dumb and acts like he doesn't understand. But Livia has already figured everything out and tells him he must be happy saving money on waste disposal. Before he can even reply, she states that she'll report her findings to City Hall, and because of that, he'll have to pay double what he planned to spend. She then says goodbye to the man while he desperately tries to convince her that she must have misunderstood something and it's not what it seems. Livia is almost leaving when she stops, remembering that she needs to keep her hospital running, even if she hates people like that principal. She quickly returns to the man and says she is the doctor who wants to be the voice of trees. With a beautiful smile on her face and her service card in hand, she cynically asks him to contact our Spruce Tree Hospital again if he ever needs to. Heading home, irritated by the situation, she thinks that guys like that principal appear all the time, always thinking they can take advantage of her just because she's a woman. Ring ring, her phone rings. On the other end, a woman tells Livia that if she doesn't arrive in 5 minutes, she'll break down the door to the second floor because she's certain she heard a noise coming from there. This panics Livia, who begs the woman to wait and rushes home as fast as she can. No one can enter the second floor because if that happens, they'll discover that it's where Livia's secret patient lives. In 3 minutes, Livia gets home just in time to stop the department head from entering the second floor room. She argues with the department head, saying she's already said many times that the second floor belongs to someone else and they shouldn't and can't go in there. But the department head is offended, saying that Livia always comes up with a different excuse for people not to go upstairs, and that she should trust her more since they've worked together for a long time. Livia assures her the room is empty and it's not a matter of trust. It's just that there really isn't anything there. But the department head doesn't seem convinced and is still curious about that room. That same night, Livia enters the second floor room. She looks at the beautiful man sleeping, connected to various machines. The only information she has about him, even after 2 years, is his name, Daniel Kwan. She remembers that the day after the accident in the mountains, everything had mysteriously been cleaned up, and the police made her pay a fine for a false call. And on the second floor of her house, which was quickly built after she signed the contract, doctors and nurses constantly came to care for and monitor Daniel, which shows just how wealthy the Kwan family must be. She sits beside the bed and, praying, asks the gods that Daniel never wakes up. The next day, Livia is working in her office when the department head, whose name is Keiko, bursts in, all excited. She shows Livia a picture of a man on her phone saying he's the only son of an architecture company. She asks Livia what she thinks of him. Bored, Livia replies that this romantic interest of hers is a bit too new. He's young enough to be her grandson. Not for me, for you, darling. Keiko snaps back. He just arrived in the city and is looking for a bride. It's a great opportunity. You know as well as I do that the way things are going, we could go bankrupt any moment. We've lost a lot of major contracts to the people from Dongsa Hospital. Besides being handsome, this guy could also bring us amazing contracts. We need to survive. We can barely pay the bills. As Keiko talks, Livia thinks about the Dongseo University Agricultural Biology Department affiliated hospital. How they made a grand and aggressive entrance into the city, building a 5-star hospital and using heavy marketing to secure landscaping, sapling, cultivation, and agriculture contracts. In no time, they took over almost all the contracts in Huaido. A disturbing image invades Livia's mind. A man with glasses watching her with a sick, revolting gaze. Something from her past connected to Dongseo Hospital. A chill runs down Livia's spine, but luckily her thoughts are interrupted by Keiko's voice, saying they must fight against Dongseo Hospital, and the best way is through the great catch she found for Livia. Keiko informs her that she managed to get Livia on the list of candidates, and that she should go on a date with the man from the photo earlier. Livia is offended and replies that she's not going on any date, especially because she's not a gold digger. In disbelief, Keiko places her hands on Livia's shoulders and tells her it's impossible to even imagine she could become a gold digger. She doesn't have the skills or personality for that. She tells Livia to stop being dramatic and just go meet the guy and have a cup of tea. Livia gets embarrassed by Keiko's comment and tries to change the subject by asking how she even found out about this heir. Keiko replies that an old friend gave her the tip. She starts advising Livia, explaining that finding a good husband isn't something you should leave to fate. It needs to be planned, especially since life is too short not to be enjoyed. While Keiko rambles on, Livia escapes the conversation, saying she needs to check something in the garden. Seeing this, Keiko, irritated, calls Livia a foolish brat, since the advice she's giving her is worth more than money. In the garden, Livia thinks about what Keiko said. Marrying, being a wife. She's never really thought deeply about it. She just wants to live peacefully, taking care of plants, just like today. Well, aside from the fact that she's hiding a potential murderer in a coma in her house, but it's been so long since he arrived that she's almost gotten used to it. She remembers how desperate she was about it all in the beginning, but over time, the anxiety and insecurity faded. The scene cuts to that same night. Livia is in her office working when she realizes it's already quite late. She gets up to take a shower and then check on her patient on the second floor. It's become a habit to check on him before bed, always wishing he never wakes up, as a way of ensuring tomorrow will be peaceful. But that night, upon entering the second floor room, Livia finds an empty bed. She panics, remembering Daniel's brother's threat. She knows she needs to find Daniel as soon as possible. She starts to run when she's suddenly caught off guard by Daniel, who is standing in a corner near the door watching her. He grabs her and restrains her with an unnatural strength for someone who has been in a coma for 2 years. Helpless and shocked by Daniel's strength, Livia tries to understand how this is even possible. She begs him to let her go, but to no avail. Trying to stay calm, she begins to appeal to his sense of reason, calling him by name. She tells him he must be confused since he just woke up, that his body must still be in a strange state, and that he should release her so she can call a doctor and explain everything. But he brings his face close to her ear and makes a shh sound, as if telling her to be quiet. This makes our protagonist feel both flustered and nervous. Right after, he asks, "Did you lock me up here? Or did I lock you up here?" Desperate, Livia insists it's neither. She tries to explain that she was taking care of him while he was unconscious for 2 years and that he needs to calm down. Upon hearing that, Daniel releases her for a few seconds, only to grab her arm again and abruptly turn her to face him. Livia then sees his face, especially his eyes. Eyes that almost glow in the darkness, beastly eyes that seem to grab her and drag her into an abyss. "Daniel Kwan, you said? So that's my name?" asks Daniel as he traps Livia between his arms. "Then tell me, are you someone important to me, woman?" With a swift movement, he grabs one of the syringes from the floor and presses it against Livia's neck as he finishes his questions. "Or maybe you're someone I wouldn't hesitate to kill?" Livia then realizes that Daniel doesn't remember what happened that night. He's lost his memories, and maybe this is her chance to stay alive and safe. Determined to survive, Livia grabs Daniel's hand, the one holding the needle, and, looking offended, says she feels hurt to hear that question from him. Of course she's important. She says she's someone who has a close connection to him, that they met in a very intimate way and have a somewhat complicated relationship, in a way that can't just be cut off at will. In a sense, she's not lying, just twisting the truth a little. Daniel grabs Livia's chin and leans over her again, asking why she's trembling so much then, if they're that close. What's the real reason she's here? Livia keeps insisting they were really close, that he was kind to her, and even once put a necklace around her neck. Daniel gets confused by Livia, as if her body is saying one thing and her words another. He assumes he must have been a real jerk to her. More confident, Livia insists that Daniel was never a jerk to her. On the contrary, he always treated her with care, never forced her to do anything, never treated her the way he is right now. "Why?" says Daniel in a hoarse voice. Livia looks confused. "Why wouldn't I do something bad to you?" he continues, gently placing his hand on the side of Livia's face. Livia starts to panic. Because it's legally required," she shouts, desperately trying to come up with an excuse. She remembers the conversation she had with Keiko earlier and blurts out, "Because I'm your wife, Daniel." Upon hearing that, Daniel looks shocked, but before he can respond, a sharp headache strikes him and he faints, collapsing unconscious on top of Livia. From that moment on, a deadly seed was sown, and our protagonist's life would be anything but the quiet and peaceful one she wished for. 1 month later, we see our protagonist in her work uniform talking to a client who's very upset because a tree important to her family was struck by lightning last night. Tearfully, the woman explains that she planted the tree with her husband to celebrate the birth of their son, and now that son is already an adult serving in the army. What if it was some kind of ominous sign? Livia calms her down and starts examining the tree. She notices the tree is in critical condition, but the roots don't seem to be damaged, so there's still a chance to save it. Keiko, who is there with Livia, approaches and questions whether she should really accept this job. If the tree dies and something happens to the woman's son, she might blame Livia for it. Livia knows this tree is important to the family, and she'll do everything to save it. Chains, medicine. She begins telling Keiko what they'll need for the job when her phone rings, and she steps aside to answer. "What do you mean you don't know when he will wake up?" Livia yells into the phone. "I spoke to him and even got crushed under him? This doesn't make any sense." "Calm down, Miss Livia," replies the doctor on the other end of the line. "When you contacted us a month ago about what happened, we believed the patient had woken up, so we brought him to the hospital to run more tests. Everything points to him developing a rare symptom of hypersomnia, a condition also known as Sleeping Beauty syndrome, where the patient can sleep for days or months when they fall asleep. It's impossible to say when or if they will wake up. The tests didn't reveal a cause for it. Apart from the partial amnesia, there are no other abnormalities in his brain. So we'll transfer him back to your house and continue monitoring him there." Hearing all of that, Livia confirms with the doctor once more if what he means is that basically Daniel is back in a coma and no one knows when or if he'll wake up again. Upon hearing the doctor's positive response, Livia becomes extremely happy. She returns to work excited, telling Keiko and the client lady that she will work hard. At the hospital, the doctor hangs up the phone, confused by Livia's excitement. He then remembers that he forgot to mention that patients with Sleeping Beauty syndrome may also show symptoms of abnormal behavior, such as excessive eating, aggression, and even extremely high libido. But since he doesn't know when the patient will wake up, or if he will, he believes forgetting to mention it won't be a problem. As the doctor walks, he thinks about Daniel's case. He knows his brother, Director Kwan, and imagines that dealing with his younger brother's situation must be complicated for him. For that reason alone, keeping him in a big hospital would be much better than sending him back to that poor house. But the doctor figures it's best not to ask questions and just do what he's being paid to do. Still, he can't stop thinking about the words the patient kept repeating when he woke up. "Please don't wake up." Daniel kept repeating those words to the doctor. That same night, our protagonist thinks about what happened last month with Daniel waking up and her telling him she was his wife. She knows it was a really dumb and insane idea, but she was desperate. No matter how desperate she was to survive. But a wife? And even worse, to a killer. Livia groans in her bed. Livia knows it was a true miracle that he fell back into a coma. She feels like she's been given a second chance, and things have gone back to how they were over the past 2 years. She gets up and heads to his room, since the doctors said they transferred him back to the second floor. But unfortunately for our protagonist, once again, when she opens the door, Daniel is not there. Only a messy bed and monitors. Damn it! She curses before running out into the streets looking for Daniel. She runs frantically through the streets for a good while, anxious about what could happen to her if she doesn't find him, until she hears a dog barking and sees a trail of chicken feathers. Following the trail, she finds Daniel, all dirty, holding a dead chicken in his hands. The sight is terrifying, and Livia freezes for a few seconds. She knows she has to control her fear and insecurity and bring him back home. She approaches Daniel, saying she was worried about him. He probably shouldn't even be walking. Daniel responds by asking where she was. He says her face kept coming to his mind, but when he woke up, the door was locked, so he had to find another way out. Realizing Daniel seems confused, she calmly introduces herself as a doctor who was taking care of him. She says she's impressed he made it this far, considering he was in a coma for years, and that maybe that's why he imagined or saw things. But that's just his brain playing tricks on him. The image of her in his mind was just a dream, so they should go back home, get some rest, and once he wakes up again, they can talk. Livia assures him he'll feel much better after resting. Daniel keeps staring at Livia. While wiping his face, he says seriously, "A dream, you say? You're probably right, because if it weren't a dream, you wouldn't be standing there so calmly. Since I spent the whole time dreaming about how I my beautiful wife." He steps closer to her, contradicting her, stating that he's not confused and he sees everything clearly. He has a wife and she's right in front of him, desperately trying to run away from him. Livia is terrified. She tries to step back, but her body is frozen, unresponsive. She wants to scream and tell him he's wrong, that none of what he said is true, but no sound comes from her slightly open mouth. She's caught off guard when Daniel calmly asks her what her name is. Without thinking and feeling pressured by his presence, she answers, "My name is Livia." "Livia?" he repeats thoughtfully. "So, you got tired of dealing with your husband and thought this was the perfect time to get rid of him?" Even though she knows his logic is partially correct, she denies what he said, explaining that she thought it was better to say she was a doctor because she was afraid he'd get scared and uncomfortable suddenly meeting a wife he didn't even remember. Daniel leans toward Livia. "What the is this? So you lied out of consideration for me?" Daniel clearly thinks Livia just said something utterly stupid and made up. "You love talking about laws. You should know damn well it's illegal to abandon your husband when he's in need of a legal guardian." He stares at her for a few seconds while she looks like a helpless little pup. "I guess I really am your husband. Just the thought of you abandoning me pisses me off." Daniel reflects while scratching his head. "I must really love you a lot." As she hears that, deep inside, Livia thinks about how this man who's now saying he loves her tried to kill her a few years ago and doesn't even remember it. That makes her realize that even with the complicated situation and the absurd strength he has, his memory loss became his weakness. And with that, she becomes the one in control. Noticing that things have calmed down, she reminds him they need to go back home. Upon hearing the word home, a silly smile appears on Daniel's face as he realizes he has a home to return to, a place that belongs to the two of them, a home. On the way back, Daniel asks Livia a bunch of questions about her and their relationship. By the time they finally get home, she's mentally exhausted. But Daniel thinks her tiredness is from carrying him. He feels a little guilty, but she insisted on carrying him because he was barefoot. After Daniel takes a bath and changes clothes, he sits near Livia so she can treat the wounds on his hands. Livia notices that even as she applies the medication that should sting and burn, Daniel is not even flinching. Distracted, she ends up looking at Daniel's face, but quickly looks away when their eyes meet. He was watching her, measuring her like a predator before hunting its prey. She hurries to finish the bandages, and as soon as she does, she starts to say goodbye to Daniel. But he, curious, asks why she's leaving. They're a married couple. Why are they sleeping apart? Surprised and embarrassed, Livia tries to explain that he's still recovering, so it's normal for them to sleep separately. He's still a patient. As he gets closer to her, Daniel argues that he was a patient. Not anymore. He's no longer in a coma. Our protagonist finally starts to realize how complicated this lie about being his wife has become. Whispering in her ear, Daniel asks if she's avoiding him because he makes her uncomfortable, because he seems different from the husband she remembers. Before she can answer, he promises to be like a plant. He won't touch her, threaten her, or force her into anything. He asks her to slowly let him become the husband she once knew and loved. And a good start would be them sleeping together again. In the end, Livia gives in and lies down beside him. Still curious, Daniel starts talking to Livia. He says he'd like to ask her so many things. Mentally wishing he'd just fall asleep and shut up, Livia asks what he's most curious about. The first question is already complicated. He asks how he ended up in a coma. She answers that they were hiking in the mountains and there was an accident where he fell and hit his head. Daniel gets worried when she says she was there too. But she reassures him, saying she wasn't hurt badly, just a few scratches. "When did we get married?" 2 years ago, Livia answers without thinking much. Upon hearing that, Daniel feels bad that Livia had to be stuck taking care of her comatose husband right after they got married. Daniel's next question is how long they dated. Livia starts getting worried. The questions are getting harder, and she has zero experience in relationships. How is she going to come up with a believable lie? Sensing Livia's discomfort with the question, Daniel assumes they had a one-night stand. For someone with zero relationship experience, the idea of a one-night stand makes Livia freeze. Daniel continues, ignoring his wife's blue screen. "So that means we slept together first? And the chemistry was so damn good we decided to get married. Damn, I can't believe I forgot something so important and hot. What a damn shame. Seems like you're way naughtier than I imagined, Livia." Livia's senses finally seem to return when she bursts into a flustered explosion, insisting that's not how they met. "Ah, so I seduced you? Made sweet Livia fall head over heels for me and lured her straight into my bed? I was a shameless bastard, huh?" says Daniel as he looks at his wife seductively. On the outside, Livia is once again speechless. Inside, her mind is racing, desperate over the direction the conversation is taking. She realizes it's not that strange for him to be flirting with her. After all, They're technically a married couple lying in the same bed. She knows she needs to steer the conversation elsewhere before things get worse. Trying to kill the mood as fast as possible, Livia says that actually, they weren't very good in bed together. Daniel is stunned. What do you mean they were bad in bed? He starts questioning Livia about the details. What was bad? Who did what wrong? It's almost like you can hear the gears turning in our protagonist's brain as she scrambles to think of a quick and plausible answer for her husband. The best answer she comes up with is that they just didn't fit well together. It never really felt like anything when we did it. And she's never even figured out what it's like to finish with someone. For the first time that night, Daniel is completely speechless after hearing that. Livia continues, saying it was never a problem. He always told her he didn't have much of a sex drive. She didn't mind either. To her, he always had this sort of monk-like aura. And at that point, she felt the two of them were perfect for each other, like it was a kind of platonic love when it came to things in bed. Let's just say our protagonist successfully murdered the mood, and maybe Daniel's soul in the process. Staring at the ceiling, he tries to process what he just heard. A monk? Me. So you're telling me you spent 2 years caring for and dedicating yourself to a man you had no sexual attachment to? Damn, you must really love me, Livia. Defeated, Daniel wishes Livia goodnight and finally goes to sleep. A few minutes pass, and just as she believes he's sleeping, she clasps her hands and prays to the gods that Daniel sleeps for at least a week. She's interrupted by Daniel, still stewing over what he just heard. What did you mean by bad at it? Was the penetration boring? The foreplay was meh? Heartbroken that the topic came back, she decides to land the final blow. I'm not exactly sure, but you always finished in an oddly fast way. Man down. Daniel is speechless after hearing that and finally decides to sleep. Livia finishes her prayer to the gods, this time wishing Daniel doesn't wake up for at least a year. The next morning, sunlight slipping through a small crack in the curtains gently wakes Livia. When she opens her eyes, she finds Daniel wishing her good morning and asking if she slept well. Livia takes a few seconds to orient herself. With a scream, she bolts upright in bed. She asks herself why the hell he's awake. Wasn't he supposed to have hypersomnia? The scene cuts to the doctor finishing his examination of Daniel. He explains that it's still too early to be certain about anything, that Daniel could fall back into a deep sleep at any moment, and they'll need to gather more data during his sleep to try establishing a pattern. Livia is chewing her nails in the corner of the room, visibly worried, while the doctor continues explaining. Maybe the change in environment triggered something in his subconscious, but I can't say for sure. Hearing the explanation, Daniel says that last night he slept with his wife. The doctor looks toward Livia and asks if that means the two of them. Livia vigorously shakes her head no. Understanding her response, the doctor goes back to his notes. Thoughtful. He concludes that for now, it's better if Livia and Daniel continue sleeping together. That way, the monitors can capture data related to this change in environment. Stunned by the doctor's advice, Livia is left speechless. Later that same day, Livia is still shaken by the fact that she now has to sleep in the same bed with Daniel every night. Curled up on the couch, she thinks that now that he's awake, she has to find a way to tell Keiko about Daniel. She runs through a few introduction scenarios in her head. Keiko, we have a new tenant living on the 2nd floor starting today. That's going to sound too forced. Maybe. Keiko? Somehow we ended up harboring a government secret agent. No. Terrible idea. Keiko, the vegetative man I was taking care of, suddenly turned into a person. Oh God, my ideas are getting worse. Maybe like this. Keiko, I picked up a guy off the street yesterday. None of this would work. Livia knows Keiko knows her too well and practically has a PhD in relationships for her, who's never even dated, to be able to fool her. Our protagonist is exhausted from dealing with all this, especially without being able to tell anyone, because according to the contract she signed, if she tells the truth to someone, that person will be considered an accomplice. And Livia doesn't want to drag anyone else into this mess, but she's pretty much out of options. The next day, outside the house plant hospital, Keiko's disbelieving scream is heard. So, you're telling me, 2 years ago you witnessed a live burial, and that murderer chased you down only to end up in a vegetative state. And instead of leaving him, you brought him home and kept him hidden all this time. And now that he's awake, you panicked and told him you were his wife? Keiko repeats, trying to process the story Livia just told her. With teary eyes, Livia confirms everything Keiko just repeated. Irritated, Keiko starts smacking Livia lightly, scolding her for being completely crazy. How could she do something like this? Keiko is sure Livia dug her own grave and just keeps digging deeper. This whole wife story only makes things more complicated. Livia tries to explain that she did all of this to survive, that he suddenly woke up and attacked her. Even so, Keiko knows it was a reckless move. Once Livia said she was his wife, she became romantically entangled with him. Annoyed, Keiko says she doesn't want to hear anything else. She's staying out of this mess. That's fine with Livia. She just needs Keiko to treat her as if she were a married woman so no one gets suspicious. Realizing there's no point in trying to inject common sense into Livia's head, Keiko asks where the guy is. She needs to meet him. At that moment, Daniel comes down the stairs from the second floor and calls out for Livia in a deep voice that instantly enchants Keiko. Mesmerized by Daniel's looks and presence, Keiko immediately starts calling him her son-in-law. The scene cuts to the three of them sitting in the reception room of Livia's house, Chao Hospital. Looking around, Daniel comments that he's never heard of Namu Hospital. He's impressed to learn that his wife is a tree doctor. Knowing that, he realizes he doesn't know what he does for a living and decides to ask Livia. Thinking quickly, Livia tells him that he used to plant flowers and that he also worked at Namu Hospital. Keiko watches the interaction between the two carefully. She finds it hard to believe that someone like him, with an angelic face and such calm, polite manners, could really have buried someone alive. Daniel turns to Keiko and, calling her mother-in-law, asks if he can sit between her and Livia because he wants to be close to his wife Keiko, charmed by being called mother-in-law, takes a few moments to respond. Livia, afraid that Daniel will get irritated by Keiko's silence and act recklessly, quickly gets up and sits beside Daniel. Daniel smiles kindly when his wife sits next to him. And Keiko, finally snapping back to reality, realizes this. She knows Livia is way too innocent when it comes to relationships. And even if she thinks she has a plan, relationships don't start or end the way we plan. Livia explains to Daniel that Keiko isn't her real mother. She works at the hospital as the manager, and they've known each other for over 15 years, so she called him her son-in-law as a way of showing affection. Daniel comments that Keiko must be really important to Livia, and in that case, he hopes she got a good impression of him. He turns to Keiko and, calling her mother-in-law again, apologizes for being different, but promises he'll do his best to become the husband Jan remembers. But he believes it won't take long, because the doctor told him that, in time, his instincts will naturally bring him back to his true self. This worries our protagonist, after all. The last thing she wants is for him to go back to being how she remembers him. She tells Daniel that he doesn't need to rush, that he can take things slowly and at his own pace. If he pushes himself too hard, it might end up hurting him. He stares at her and asks her to call him only by his first name and be less formal with him. It's not fair that she occupies 90% of his thoughts and still acts like a stranger in front of him. He gently touches and caresses Livia's face, as he says he would be a terrible husband if the only thing he remembered was her face. He wants to remember her tenderness with him. Livia's heart races at his touch. She tries to convince herself mentally that it's only because she's afraid of him. Being this close to him must be making her anxious. Our protagonist refuses to acknowledge that she's getting romantically involved with Daniel. While watching the two of them, Keiko knows what she has to do. Find out exactly who Daniel Kwan is. That night, Livia was exhausted because Daniel had stayed close to her all day while she tried to avoid him. And the new recommendation from the doctor haunted her all day. She remembers that the contract only obliges her to keep Daniel close until the real killer is caught. As long as she does that, she's in the clear. Livia goes to Daniel's room, determined to lock him inside during the night. But when she gets there, she sees he destroyed the electronic lock, making it impossible to lock the door, frustrating our protagonist's plan. Through the crack in the door, she sees that Daniel is shirtless, sweaty, and doing push-ups. His muscles well-defined and working out with ease. This surprises Livia. Daniel had been bedridden for 2 years in a coma. How does he still have such a fit body? Despite his gentle behavior and innocent appearance, she knows she can't forget the Daniel she met 2 years ago. A cold man who buried someone alive with a smile on his face. She grows increasingly uneasy because she knows that even without regaining his memories, if he decides to attack her, she wouldn't stand a chance. Lost in thought, she goes to sleep in her room, praying that he doesn't come to her door and that he simply goes back to sleep. As soon as she closes her eyes, she hears a voice coming from the door, calling her name and asking her to open it. Trembling with fear, she hides under the covers, wishing he would just go away. Daniel keeps calling for Livia and tries to enter, but the door is locked. With silence as the only response, Daniel stops trying to get in. He turns and walks away. Hearing Daniel's footsteps, Livia feels relieved. She gets out of bed, walks to the door, and presses her ear to it to check if Daniel really left. "You really thought I had gone away?" Daniel asks from the other side of the door as soon as Livia gets close. In a panic, Livia quickly backs away from the door. Daniel implies he has nowhere else to go. He asks her to come closer to the door because he can't smell her sweet scent of wet grass. The fact that he can smell her through the door and distinguish her scent makes Livia think he's like a wild animal. In a melancholic tone, he says, "If you are not here, I don't even know what I am. Even with a physically healthy body, I don't feel real. I don't feel human. Tell me, Livia, that this is all real and not just a dream." His hands slide down the door as he, almost crying, begs her to tell him he's not going crazy, to help him find himself again, to feel real, to tell him a story from the past. Even if it's a silly story, it doesn't matter. He just needs proof that he existed. Livia notices his breathing is heavier and that even though he could easily break down the door separating them, he isn't doing it. She wonders if the lies she told him about him being kind, polite, gentle, are the only thing holding him back. Our protagonist feels a tightness in her chest. She feels strange. Daniel Kwan, I'm naked, trying to rinse shampoo out of my eyes. Maybe now's not the best time to have a conversation about the past. To Livia's surprise, Daniel agrees with her. Looking down at the bulge in his pants, he says he'll go back upstairs and take a shower. Just like her. He says goodbye in a strange way, almost as if he were heading somewhere very far away. Hearing his response, Livia perks up, celebrating her small victory. Surprised that she actually managed to tame him. That night, although physically alone, Livia had nightmares about Daniel the entire time. A week passed, and Daniel has been sleeping deeply ever since. Though Livia is happy and relieved to have her peaceful days back, she can't stop thinking about Daniel. About how his voice sounded so sad when he said goodbye that night, almost like he knew he wouldn't wake up for a while. In a gray-toned room, a small, wounded Livia in dirty clothes writes the same phrase over and over on a sheet of paper. "I shouldn't have been born. I shouldn't have been born." She cries as she writes it again and again and again. The same sentence, her fingers worn and reddened from writing so much. The pile of paper beside her begins to rise, the sheets attacking her and wrapping around her, suffocating her when Livia, now an adult, wakes up crying and gasping for breath from her nightmare. It takes her a few minutes to realize it was all just a bad dream. Keiko bursts into Livia's room, alarmed by the screams she heard coming from there, likely from the nightmare Livia had. She apologizes for waking her up, but says she was worried. Livia replies that it's fine. She was planning to get up anyway and get ready for work. In the bathroom, Livia stares at herself in the mirror, trying to convince herself she's okay, that it's just another day. At work, Livia goes to a nearby restaurant where a man she already knows had sprayed pesticide on the trees around the area to kill them. When the man sees Livia, he tries to kick her out at any cost. But Livia stands her ground, showing strength. Seeing that the restaurant is full, Livia causes a small scene. This embarrasses the man and forces him to drag Livia away from his customers so they can talk in private. Outside, they argue a little more. Livia stays firm, polite, and lighthearted. But when the man says he wants the tree to die, Livia becomes angry. Why do humans think they have the right to decide who lives or dies? Small fragments of her past rise to the surface, and it brings her to tears. That same evening, Livia sits on her living room couch, deep in thought. Even though she had the peaceful week she's wished for so long, the silence, the calm, feels empty, suffocating. While lost in thought, she hears a sound coming from the second floor. Worried, she goes upstairs to check. Maybe Daniel has woken up. To her surprise, Daniel is still asleep, and as she gets closer, she realizes he's crying, even while unconscious. She's initially touched by the sight. His sleep is restless. Even in sleep, he seems to be begging for someone to hide him. Livia wonders if these are the victims haunting him. Even so, she can't help but care for him. Sitting beside him and watching, she wipes away his tears, telling him that crying is pointless. Crying never changed anything in her life. No one ever listened, even though she cried for days. She remembers her childhood, isolated, alone, with only trees and plants for company. Back in the present, Livia keeps watching Daniel. Something doesn't feel right. It's just a bad feeling, nothing more than a hunch. But maybe the reason he woke up a week ago and the reason he hasn't woken up again since, it's just a tiny, insignificant possibility. Livia thinks as she lies down beside Daniel in bed. "Happy birthday," she says with a sad tone in her voice. Even though she's looking at Daniel, it feels like she's saying it to herself. Her eyes grow heavy and she begins to drift off thinking that, honestly, today is one of those days she wishes she could cry, just like he is. Morning arrives, and as the soft light slips through the window of the second-floor room, we see Daniel open his eyes. He stares at the ceiling, still groggy, until he feels something pressing softly near his chest. When he looks to see what it is, surprised, he sees Livia lying beside him, asleep. Serene, defenseless, beautiful. He blushes slightly, feeling happy and thoughtful. Livia, a tree doctor and my wife, but also the only memory, the only face left in my mind. Even though she shows concern, thinking I'd feel uncomfortable being around her, standing before a wife I can't remember, but she couldn't be more wrong. I could tell at a glance why you are my wife, why you have to be my wife. I couldn't even spare a moment to take my eye off you. But why do you look at me like that? Like you're scared? Why do you sometimes smile like you're uncomfortable? Why is there no ring mark on your ring finger? Why does our house have no wedding pictures or memories of us together? Why does it always feel like I'm running into a door that never opens? With these painful, sad thoughts, Daniel continues watching her until she starts to stir and wake. He gently places a hand on her arm and says good morning. Livia, surprised that Daniel woke up, quickly sits up in bed, a bit embarrassed for having slept so deeply beside him. Daniel silently notices his wife's discomfort. He concludes that maybe she's secretly looking for a chance to run far away from him. He tries to push those thoughts aside by changing the subject and asks Livia how long he was asleep, since his body feels kind of stiff. She answers that he slept for 8 days straight. Daniel smiles at Livia and says he understands clearly now. She has control over his mornings. Ever since the first night they slept together, he noticed there was something special. Livia looks at him confused, not quite understanding what he's saying. He teases her, saying he wishes she'd take control over their nights too. So from today on, he's moving into her room. She blushes with embarrassment at his comment. Seeing her embarrassed, and at the same time adorable, expression only makes Daniel want to be closer to her. If she really is trying to run away from him, he has no intention of letting her go. After all, who'd be crazy enough to lose the only memory they have? The scene cuts to the garden in front of the hospital. Keiko and Livia are talking. Keiko can't believe the outfit Livia chose to wear to a major botany and gardening event. Every plant hospital in the region will be there, and Livia needs to show up with presence as the director of Namu Hospital. Livia doesn't seem too worried about her clothes because she made sure to bring a detailed book of her most recent cases. And even if Namu Hospital doesn't receive many clients, they've never lost a single tree. Keiko, who's facing the front door of the house, sees Daniel coming out dressed well and with a new haircut that she gave him. She tells Livia that Daniel should be the hospital's poster boy and that she invited him to the auction as well. Livia looks where Keiko is staring and can't help but notice Daniel's beauty, causing her to turn red. She had deliberately only let him wear hospital clothes to make it harder for him to escape, but Keiko didn't listen. She not only bought him clothes, she gave him a haircut too. Practically a full identity refresh. Livia is worried about all these changes. She's not a good liar and doesn't know how she'll manage to pretend to be married to him in front of so many people. On top of that, maybe with enough external stimulation, Daniel's memories could return. Our protagonist tries to convince Daniel to stay home, saying he should rest. But Daniel says he's not tired, and then reveals that he knows she just doesn't want him to go because she's afraid he'll embarrass her. Livia insists that's not the reason. Daniel presses her. If that's not the reason, then what is? Our protagonist struggles to answer, digging through her mind for a good excuse until, "Being outside is dangerous for you, Daniel," says Livia, shocking everyone. Daniel looks at her, even more confused, and asks why it would be dangerous for him. Unable to look him in the eyes while answering and redder than a chili pepper, Livia says it's because he's too handsome. And the auction is full of jealous, middle-aged men. Someone young and kind like Daniel has no idea how scary and dangerous that can be. Everyone goes silent for a moment, and Livia wonders if she might have gone way too far with her excuse. The silence is broken by Daniel, embarrassed but happy, thinking that because Livia finds him so attractive, she wants to hide him just for herself. Daniel's conclusion, Livia's words, and his cute, flustered expression make our protagonist's heart race. Livia tries to ignore what he said, and just explains that she would simply prefer if he stayed home. "Because you want to be the only one seeing my handsomeness?" insists Daniel. Our protagonist has already dug deep enough. It's too late to back out now. She explains to Daniel that technically they're still newlyweds, considering they had a pause due to the accident that left Daniel in a coma. So, of course she wants to be the only one to see his beauty. Even redder after hearing that, Daniel says that if that's the case, then Livia shouldn't go out either. His reply doesn't help calm our poor protagonist's heart. With a bright smile on his face, Daniel tells her not to worry, that even when they're out, he'll do everything she tells him to. His smile, his behavior, everything he does somehow leaves her speechless. Keiko, who was watching the entire scene like she was enjoying a movie at the cinema, hurries the two of them so they won't be late for the auction. At the auction, as Keiko and Livia walk through the sea of people, those around them gossip. They whisper about how Livia dresses without femininity and seems totally unapproachable. She's never going to find a husband like that. Meanwhile, Keiko is said to be aging as well as fine wine. Hearing the gossip, Livia feels uncomfortable. She already hates crowded places, but especially in their line of work, this male-dominated field. Having a plant hospital run by 2 women draws too much attention, and not for the right reasons. Noticing Livia looks tense, Daniel moves closer and gently takes her hand. Our protagonist has a mini meltdown from the unexpected display of affection, but she's even more surprised when he asks her if she prefers eyes or mouths, since people in that place seem to lack manners and gossip so loudly everyone can hear. They deserve punishment. Horrified at the possibility of Daniel causing a massacre at the auction, Livia scolds him, forbidding him from doing anything to the people there. Daniel looks at her with a puppy-eyed stare, saying he was just trying to be nice to her, but he understands and promises not to do anything she doesn't want. He brings their intertwined hands to his chest and smiles sweetly at Livia, a smile so stunning it draws the attention of those around them. Over the loudspeakers, it's announced that the representatives from each hospital must proceed to the presentation room. Livia, as the director of Namu Hospital, needs to go. She lets go of Daniel's hand and says goodbye to him and Keiko. On her way to the presentation room, she notices her hand is warm, as if it absorbed Daniel's heat. It makes her blush. In the presentation room, the representatives from each hospital are informed about the project they'll be competing for at the auction. The Dome Project, the largest botanical garden in the country, set to be built here, including a tropical dome greenhouse, an outdoor ecological park, an artificial waterfall, a replicated tropical rainforest. A massive public endeavor that the city of Hwayang is betting everything on. Everyone there knows this is an incredibly important project, and whichever hospital wins it will gain enormous prestige. But some present don't agree with a public auction being used for something so critical. The presenter explains that this is the best way to ensure the best hospital gets the contract. Dome will house some of the rarest plants in the world. There's no way they can simply trust scammers who buy their way into closed auctions through bribes and drinks. He adds that the public auction process will be a little different. It'll be tournament style, and the entire process will be filmed. The winner, besides earning a 10-year contract with Dome, will also appear in a documentary. That's why all competitors should expect a film crew to visit their hospital soon. Upon hearing this, our protagonist becomes saddened. After the meeting, Livia is sitting beside Daniel, explaining that she won't participate in the auction anymore. She doesn't like the idea of being filmed. She just wants to live in peace, and appearing on TV could bring too much trouble. 2 men approach the couple. One is George, the director of Dongseo Tree Hospital, and the other is Carlos, one of George's most promising pupils. Before coming to the city of Hwaido, our protagonist worked at Dongseo Hospital. She had hoped that by coming to Hwaido, she would never have to see Carlos's face again. A few years ago, when she went through hell at Dongseo Hospital, she had to endure an abusive work environment just to get the required hours needed to start her own hospital. That's why she was able to bear it all. But what bothered her most was Carlos, who stalked her constantly. He followed her, stared at her, watched her, and sometimes even verbally harassed her. When Livia finally reached her limit, she reported him to her superiors. And to her shock, she was the one who got fired. Seeing George and Carlos trying to act friendly with her, even though both know exactly what they did, enrages Livia. But George either doesn't notice or chooses to ignore Livia's discomfort. He pulls Keiko away for a little stroll and leaves Livia, Daniel, and Carlos alone. Carlos, initially ignoring Daniel's presence, tries to get close to Livia and touch her. Daniel, noticing this, pulls her close and wraps his arms around her. He says he feels uncomfortable because he's not sure if Carlos is someone he should know. Our sweet protagonist explains that Carlos isn't someone Daniel knew. He was just a senior back when she was an intern at another hospital. Carlos watches the scene, clearly irritated, and calls Livia by name, asking who the guy sitting next to her is. Daniel, clearly amused by the little situation, teases Livia, asking her to introduce him to Carlos. Both men keep waiting for her response, staring at her expectantly. Embarrassed, she says Daniel is the man she lives with. Shocked, Carlos doesn't believe it and asks again, just to confirm if Livia is really married to Daniel. Continuing his playful teasing, Daniel whispers in Livia's ear, telling her to just nod her head so Carlos gets the message. With her face flushed red and Daniel holding her by the waist, she nods shyly. To make it perfectly clear, Daniel says out loud that he is Livia's husband. Carlos completely loses it. Impossible. Livia, you're not the type of person who dates men. You hated getting involved with people. You spent your nights staring at trees and your weekends making fertilizer at home. Do you really expect me to believe anyone else could tolerate that but me? Says Carlos, revealing the disgusting stalker he truly is. A controlling bastard who puts the women he obsesses over into a box. And when they do anything to step outside of it, he loses his mind and stomps all over them. Livia knows this. She lived through that hell for a long time. Our protagonist stands up, furious, putting that damned Carlos in his place, reminding him that she left Dongseo Hospital years ago, and today, as he can clearly see, she is married and runs her own hospital. She's not someone he can simply belittle anymore. Carlos becomes even more enraged and starts yelling at Livia, demanding solid proof that Daniel is really her husband. Daniel has heard Livia's name coming out of Carlos's filthy mouth one too many times. He warns Carlos to stop calling for her unless he wants to die. Livia, afraid that the situation might spiral into something worse, gets up and pulls Daniel out of the room, leaving Carlos behind still trying to process what just happened. In my humble opinion, she should have let Daniel teach that Carlos a proper lesson. Outside, Livia asks why Daniel threatened to kill Carlos, knowing that depending on his answer, she may need to minimize his contact with people as much as possible. But to Livia's surprise, Daniel apologizes. Livia tells him he doesn't need to apologize. She was just surprised by how he acted. Daniel says that every time that bastard called Livia's name, it made him angrier and angrier. He held himself back as much as he could, but honestly, he wanted to rip Carlos's mouth off. Especially because it seemed like during that whole conversation, Livia was trying not to cry. Livia realizes how perceptive and reactive Daniel really is. The reason he was calm at first and then snapped is probably because he picked up on how uncomfortable she felt. It's like her emotions overflow into Daniel. So the best way to control him is for her to control her emotions when he's nearby. Back at home, Livia tells Keiko she's decided to compete in the public auction. Knowing the Dongseo Hospital people are involved makes her want to join, just to crush them. Livia wants to put Carlos and George in their place, but also, facing the idea of having to deal with cameras is a good start for her to become stronger. Keiko says goodbye to the two of them, and as soon as she leaves, Daniel seems a little upset about not being of much help with the hospital work. Livia tells him not to worry and says she has a request to make. She asks him, from now on, to only look at beautiful and happy things. Smiling, he says that if that's what she wants, he'll do it with pleasure. The two look at each other for a few seconds, and a romantic atmosphere takes over the space. It feels like they're finally connecting. Noticing that, Livia hurries into the house, saying she's going to shower and then go to bed. At that moment, Daniel asks if he shouldn't wash her back then. The idea of them showering together makes Livia explode with embarrassment. She quickly says she's extremely conservative. Daniel reminds her that they're married. She counters by saying that even being married doesn't mean he has free access to everything. Daniel confesses that he feels like if he doesn't take proper care of his wife, he loses his purpose as a husband. He's already forgotten so many things. He doesn't want to lose anything else. It wasn't because he wasn't needed in her life that she let him sleep for a whole week without waking him. Livia says that even so, having him wash her back makes her feel shy. Not understanding, he reminds her that they've already done worse things together, according to what she told him. Touché. Our dear protagonist seems to have no way out. She realizes Daniel doesn't intend to back off and ends up agreeing, as long as he promises to only touch her back. In the bathroom, as she undresses, she tries to calm down, thinking of it as therapy, a massage. Our protagonist was confident she could handle it, but being naked in front of Daniel made her lose all her courage. Daniel sits behind her to wash her back and notices that even in the bathtub, Livia is wearing underwear. He asks if she's doing that because she's embarrassed. She gets flustered that Daniel noticed that detail and gives a nervous excuse. She says she did it so he wouldn't feel uncomfortable, since he doesn't remember doing this with her before. Since she's turned away from him, every small movement he makes startles Livia. Seeing his wife acting shy and cute, Daniel begins to imagine what it would be like if he actually had his memories back. He imagines himself touching Livia's body, teasing her while whispering in her ear. The idea of being more intimate with his lovely wife makes him want to recover his memories as fast as possible. His steamy thoughts are interrupted when Livia tells him to hurry up and just wash her back already. He looks at her back and notices small scars. Concerned, he asks what happened. At first, Livia says nothing and gets thoughtful, until she decides to tell him the scars were caused by her family. Angry, Daniel says her family must have been garbage to do that to her. Defensive, Livia explains that maybe there was a reason for it. Daniel disagrees. Nothing justifies hitting and hurting someone. Almost as if she were conditioned to think that way, Livia says maybe those things happen when you love too much. Love and hate are very close emotions. Love can turn into hate in an instant. Hearing that, Daniel begins to connect the dots, but incorrectly. The almost animalistic behavior that tried to take over him when he woke up. Her actions that seemed to be full of fear toward him. Her negative view about sex. He always found it strange. Maybe the real Daniel Kwan had... He can't finish the thought. It makes him feel sick. Determined, Daniel says he wants to play a little game and starts to massage Livia's back in an incredibly relaxing way. Livia thinks the massage feels really good and relaxing, but she's not used to this kind of treatment. She's not used to being taken care of. No one had ever bothered to ask what caused her scars. Small fragments of memory from her past emerge in Livia's mind. She grew up in a childhood without love or affection, surrounded by people who didn't care about her. That's why she even stopped crying. Because crying didn't change anything. That was her life. Realizing her mind is drifting to a dark place, she splashes water on her own face to push those thoughts away. But the water was full of soap. Daniel worries again about her eyes burning because of the soap. He turns on the shower and asks her to wash her face quickly. But that makes Livia start crying. Why would something like a scar worry him? Why does he care? I want someone to care. Can I have someone who cares? Lying on the bed, Livia feels very relaxed from the bath and the massage Daniel gave her. She starts to get sleepy, and strangely, being in the same bed with Daniel doesn't bother her. On the contrary, she feels comfortable near him. She thinks that even though he's a difficult person, being close to him isn't that bad. A few seconds pass, and Livia seems to really realize everything she just thought. She suddenly sits up in bed like she got shocked. Feeling like she's going insane? After all, how could she think Daniel's presence was comfortable or good? She literally saw him burying someone. Convinced that Daniel is a horrible person, she turns to him, piercing him with her eyes. He, trying to understand what's going on, asks her if by any chance he hurt her when he massaged her back. Livia, having an internal fight with her thoughts, starts lightly hitting her own head. Quickly, Daniel grabs one of Livia's hands and asks why she's hurting herself. He doesn't understand what's going on. A minute ago, she was lying there comfortably, and suddenly everything changed. Watching Livia's terrified and lost look, Daniel asks if he did something that made her uncomfortable. Daniel's gentle and worried tone messes even more with Livia's heart. She turns her face away so she doesn't have to see his kind eyes. Daniel believes she's so mad at him that she doesn't even want to speak to him. Suddenly, an instinct takes over Daniel. Livia, you've never really been angry with anyone, have you? You shouldn't show yourself this vulnerable in front of someone when you're mad, Daniel says as he grabs her chin and begins to move his face closer to her neck. He bites her neck gently and then kisses the spot. Livia shivers and tries to push Daniel away, asking him to stop. But he doesn't seem to hear her. He keeps kissing and touching her. He's thirsty. Thirsty for Livia. He wants to touch her, kiss her, and see her body tremble with pleasure in response. Amidst all the sensations, Livia thinks that Daniel seems strange, different. Up until now, every time she showed resistance or asked him to stop, he respected her and listened. Daniel, at the mercy of his own instincts, seems to need to satisfy a beast that lives inside him. He keeps touching her until Livia's trembling voice asks, "Did your memories return?" Livia's question snaps Daniel out of his trance. "What am I doing?" he wonders. "You remember everything? Is that why you're acting like this, Daniel?" Livia asks, her voice full of fear. Her words hit Daniel like a knife. He already had suspicions that he wasn't a good husband before losing his memory, but those words and the fear in Livia's eyes confirmed everything. He pulls away from her, puts a hand over his face while apologizing. Almost begging for forgiveness, he says he doesn't know what came over him. "I just lost my mind for a second and made a mistake." He gets out of bed, still apologizing, saying he'll sleep alone. Walking to the door, he asks Livia to only wake him up when she feels better, even if it takes 2 months. Livia asks him to wait, but he doesn't listen and leaves the room. She gets up and rushes after him. When she reaches the stairs, he's already halfway down. Frustrated, she shouts for him to wait until she sees Daniel's face. He looks like he's about to cry at any moment, vulnerable and upset. Daniel asks her to stay away, says if he smells her, separate rooms won't be an option anymore. Saying that, he runs into Livia's bedroom. She tries to stop him, saying if he plans on sleeping for a long time, he should do it in his room upstairs. But Daniel closes the door and locks himself in Livia's room. And just like that, Daniel drifted into sleep for the 3rd time. The scene cuts to a new day. We see a boy walking to Namu Hospital while reading a book about mating insects. Meanwhile, in the office, Keiko and Livia are talking about the Waidome project. The first challenge of the competition has been announced. Livia says the challenge will be pruning. Keiko finds it strange. After all the fuss they made, it's just a simple pruning competition. But Livia reveals that the tree to be pruned is about 98 feet tall, and the use of ladders or lift trucks is banned. Upon hearing this, Keiko initially laughs like she's hearing a joke, and Livia joins her. A few seconds later, Keiko explodes in anger. Are they kidding me? A 98 feet tall tree is as tall as a 10-story building. Are they trying to kill people? I need to call them right now and complain. Livia holds Keiko back and tries to calm her down, explaining that being an arborist often requires climbing trees, and it's a job that demands a certain amount of physical strength. Maybe they're testing how fearless and physically fit you are as a tree doctor. Still irritated, Keiko says that even so, they don't live on a deserted and isolated island. So why the hell did they ban ladders and lift trucks? The boy from earlier, who just entered Namu Hospital, overhears part of Keiko and Livia's heated conversation and decides not to interrupt them. He walks to Livia's room and finds Daniel peacefully sleeping in her bed. Impressed by a man he has never seen before, he curiously approaches Daniel. He pulls back Daniel's blanket and begins analyzing him as if he were reading a scientific book. This male consists of a head, torso, and legs, boasting a perfectly proportioned body with 2 arms and 2 legs. He is taller than the bed, and a prominent nose is his defining feature, the male's reproductive part. Livia, who just entered the room, screams for the boy to stop what he's doing. We discover that this adorable boy is named Bruno, and he is 7 years old. Livia asks Bruno what he's doing there and scolds him for not saying anything when he arrived. She grabs his hand and starts leading him out of the room, saying that place is dangerous and they should go to the living room. Bruno is impressed by Daniel and keeps saying that he is a rare male, that his form is magnificent. Livia tells us that Bruno is, unofficially, the insect specialist at the hospital, and that at home he doesn't get much attention or care. One day he came to visit the hospital, and since then it became a habit for him to come often. Outside the room, Livia says that Daniel is not rare, he is dangerous. Bruno replies, saying that every male is strong and dangerous. She walks to the window to open the curtain while talking with Bruno about the animal kingdom. But to her surprise, outside, with his face pressed against the glass trying to listen, is Carlos. Upon seeing Carlos's squished face on the glass, Livia gets startled. She yells at him, asking what he's doing there. Carlos explains that he saw the child entering her house and got curious. Bruno begins observing again as if reading a scientific book. He says Carlos's body and physical form are strange and unpleasant to look at, that the way he leans against the window makes him look pathetic. Hearing what Bruno says, Carlos gets irritated and calls the boy a little pest. Livia tries to ease the situation. She gives Bruno a cookie and asks him to wait there a bit while she comes back. She goes outside to confront Carlos, telling him he shouldn't be there, and if he doesn't leave immediately, she will call the police. Ignoring what Livia says, Carlos asks if Bruno is her son and if he's the reason she left the hospital where they both worked. Irritated by Carlos's audacity and lack of tact, Livia says, "What's the problem if he is my son?" She also reminds Carlos that she didn't leave the hospital. She was fired because of him. Hearing only what he wants to hear, Carlos begins to spiral at the thought of Livia having a child. He can't believe it's possible since he kept strict surveillance on her. He would have seen or known if she was involved with any guy. Seeing this, Livia starts calling the police, saying that a stalker has invaded her house. Still in his meltdown, Carlos insists they go to the family registry office so he can see with his own eyes if what she's saying is true. He hears Livia talking to the police and demands that she stop treating him like a criminal, because it's all her fault. She's acting out of control. All she has to do is show her family registry. Livia looks at Carlos with disgust. She knows he's only bothering her again, not out of devotion, but probably because he's been rejected by several women, and when he saw her again, he thought she'd be an easy target. But he couldn't be more wrong. She's not the same Livia from before. She's been through a lot in recent years, and she's not gonna tolerate this little shit again. She picks up a bunch of mud that was nearby and threatens Carlos. "I let it slide for too long. Do I look like a pushover to you? Stay out of my personal life. Also, now I have a very scary husband. You saw him before, right? His temper is no joke. So stay out of my life or things will start to get scary for you." She throws the mud on the ground, wipes her hands, and walks back into the house. Carlos stays outside, motionless, initially surprised by how different Livia is acting from the way he used to know her. She used to be reclusive, someone who was easily subdued. He watches her inside the house, and as she notices this, she angrily closes the curtains. Carlos continues his macabre thoughts. He believes maybe she's acting this way because she's been away from him and forgot that he dominates her. He needs to make Livia remember her old self and remember that he is the one who controls her. And with that, Carlos began stalking Livia again. A few days go by, and we see Livia talking to two police officers. She is complaining to them about Carlos stalking her. She's had accidental run-ins with him at least 3 times in the same day, which clearly isn't a coincidence. But the officers say they can't do anything because there hasn't been any concrete harm and they can't stop Carlos from walking in that area. Livia then asks about the roses left at her gate every day. The officers respond that unfortunately they can't do anything about it, and besides, Carlos has an alibi. He has proof he was at work most of the day. Livia becomes a bit desperate and irritated by the officers' incapacity. She knows Carlos is stalking her. He's done it before. When she tells this to the officers, they assume her certainty is just a guess. And besides, there's a record that she made a false murder report 2 years ago, while there's no record of Carlos stalking her in the past. Livia feels alone, vulnerable as she hears this and watches the officers leave. Almost without thinking, she walks to the door of the room where Daniel is sleeping and watches. Keiko appears behind Livia and tells her that if she's going to wake Daniel, she needs to make up your mind before you do. Livia looks at Keiko, confused by her words. Keiko then says that if she's going to treat Daniel like a murderer, then she has to stay away from him completely and make that clear to him. But if she's going to ask for his help, she needs to treat him like a person. Right now, Daniel is like an empty vessel with nothing inside. He's not the man she met 2 years ago. He is someone completely new and unknown, both to himself and to her. And if Livia can't understand and separate that in her mind, then she shouldn't wake him up. With Keiko's words, Livia looks at Daniel thoughtfully. This whole time, she's been looking at Daniel as if he were a murderer, always guarding herself to stay emotionally distant from him. That same night, Livia is working diligently, still thinking about what Keiko told her earlier. Seeing him that way, as a murderer and nothing more, made the guilt of lying to him about the marriage feel a bit lighter. Is it wrong to think about waking him up just because I need him by my side? I know that if he wakes up, he'll definitely put an end to this situation. But who do I believe in? Would I really consider waking him up if I truly believed he was only a murderer? No, I would never trust a murderer. The Daniel I believe in and trust is someone who is blindly devoted to me, erratic and unpredictable. That man is the one I believe is the one I know. It's almost midnight when Livia finishes her work. The whirlwind of thoughts and the manual labor distracted her for a few good hours. She walks through the living room when she comes across a macabre figure outside her window watching her. She's certain it's Carlos. That sight disgusts Livia. She horrifiedly puts her hands over her mouth to muffle a desperate scream and steps back in fear. Carlos watches her in a disturbing way, telling her that she knows she doesn't have a husband. The scene cuts to Daniel, waking up abruptly with tears in his eyes. He turns to the side and sees Livia lying beside him, asleep. She, sensing the change in his presence beside her, wakes up and finds Daniel awake, looking at her with a tender gaze. He gently asks how she's been, and if her being there next to him means his punishment is finally over. But Livia only looks at him without saying anything. She observes the slight redness at the corners of his eyes soften and his lips curve into a gentle smile. Why is he happy? A man who was forced to sleep for 8 consecutive days, and during those 8 nights had to endure nightmares while crying every night, and even knowing that I still let you wander through those nightmares. Livia feels like crying. Her eyes begin to fill with tears. Daniel, noticing this, becomes worried and asks what's going on. With a trembling and tearful voice, she explains that there was just some annoying trouble. I was originally going to handle it on my own, so I collected fingerprints from the window using tape and bought a few traps, but he kept lurking around and it was driving me insane. Daniel gently places his hand over Livia's hand, trying to calm her down. He asks her to explain slowly what happened. He softly caresses her face as she calms down and begins to tell him everything that happened and her past with Carlos. Livia believes she doesn't deserve for him to be so gentle with her. But even so, she feels comfort. This is the Daniel she knows. After listening to the whole story, Daniel understands that she must have gone through a lot of hardship because of Carlos, and that she woke him because she knew he would help her. Livia, upon hearing this, thinks that Daniel thinks she is shameless. She starts to explain herself, but Daniel hugs her and says she did the right thing in waking him, the right thing in asking for his help. Livia remembers the police judging her and refusing to help while Daniel holds her, saying everything is okay now. She starts crying again, moved, while Daniel's gaze tells us that Carlos is in serious trouble very soon. And that's it for today, folks. I hope you enjoyed the story. What are your thoughts? I must confess my heart feels heavy. I don't think he is who she thinks he is. I feel like something was left untold. And him holding himself back so he doesn't hurt our protagonist. I think it's sweet, especially since the doctor said his illness has other side effects, right? But tell me, what are your theories or what do you think in the comments? And if you want more, don't forget to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss any new ones I post. See you next time.